the year.
Order. I did not make the comment.
Bill is not about taking away rights. It is about giving opportunity.
Good, ladies and gentlemen, good evening and welcome to the final ever Citizen A, where we wrap the week's current affairs for the last time with a panel of bloggers and opinion shapers. Joining me tonight for our 2013 Year in Review special, he seems to be the only male broadcaster who doesn't manage to offend victims of crime on Radio Live, host of Backbenchers, Prime's answer to John Campbell, the ever-brilliant Wallace Chapman, and he's had the most ridiculous journey back from the backbenchers to lead the Labour Party this year, high-ranking Jedi Knight and the next Prime Minister of New Zealand, the Right Honourable David Cunliffe. Welcome to you both. Coming up tonight, Issue 1, what were the big political, economic and social issues of 2013? Issue 2, how did the media serve us over the last year? And Issue 3 tonight, what predictions for 2014? Plus, we'll end the show on the final word, but let's kick things off tonight with Issue 1. It was a year of unrelenting unemployment levels, widening inequality and increasing debt, fueling a property bubble finally balanced on top of an economy propped up by selling intensively farmed milk powder to China. Damn the environmental consequences. And that was the good news. The bad and the ugly news was a corporate welfare charity scheme that never was short of a crony mate to prop up, and a privatisation of public assets that bordered on economic self-mutilation. David, it seems like it was a pretty good year for doing business if you were a Facebook friend of Stephen Joyce.
Yeah, I think even the business community is getting sick of the idea that the rules have changed and that to get a job done you've got to be on first name terms with Stephen Joyce or John Key. So I'm getting a lot of that from business. Why have the rules have changed? How do you get something done in this place? And where is the plan? You know, so even business is saying that. But you're absolutely right on the family stuff. For real New Zealanders, all they know is that they haven't got anything more in their wallets. The prices are going up, but the wages aren't going up as fast. And to hear the bigwigs say they're doing fine now and they're getting these massive salary rises, people are rightly saying, well, what about us? You know? And so we're really feeling for the folks who are doing it tough and are waiting for this pot of gold at the end of a rainbow that's not coming for them.
If business don't feel that their ideas are being met with meritocracy, that they can put together an idea, put it in front of the government, and the government decides based on what's best for New Zealand. If they don't feel that they can do that, do you think a lot of them are going to come in behind Labour for next year?
Oh yeah, I think that's already happening. I think the smart money is realising that there's quite likely to be, probably will be, a change of government next year, and they are coming alongside us to establish relationships that will carry them into the new government. And what we're saying is that we want two things to change. One, we want one set of rules for all, transparent rules with good evidence, so everybody knows where they are. And secondly, we want a game plan that's actually going to add value, create jobs, put more money in the pockets of Kiwi families so we can raise our kids.
You will talk to some small business people, and I know you know this, that will say that some of the rules that National have created, like the 90-day hire and fire, gives us a chance to try people out. A meaningful and practical chance. What would you say to that?
Oh, yeah, there are some trade-offs around the edges, but if Labour's whole labour law package is about keeping wage rates down and keeping an unemployment pool there so unions are powerless, well, that's actually no way to build a high-value economy. We want a different vision. We want a much more positive vision where workers are valued, where companies are able to invest in capital and plant and equipment because they've got tax structures that support that, and that they've got investment in R&D.
Part of that's happening now, though, isn't it?
Not as much as it should be. As Bomber has said, there's too much money going into real estate speculation.
Let's get into that. The gap between high and low incomes has widened faster in recent decades in New Zealand than most developed nations. Across all adults, the top 1% owns 3 times as much wealth as the poorest 50%. New Zealand now has the widest income gap since detailed records began in the early 1980s. Right. The average household in the top 10% of New Zealand has 9 times the income of one in the bottom 10%. 270,000 children living in poverty, combined with vicious welfare reforms. Not a great year for benefit, is it?
No. I mean, you don't really have to convince me about that. And actually, I tweeted about 2 months ago that really for me, what will be the issue on the podium next year will be this one word, and it is inequality. What I'm seeing, what I'm finding, you know, here's an example, right? So I'm on a good wage. I can manage myself. I talked to a taxi driver. In fact, so concerned was I, he switched off the engine, and we talked about how he's going to pay his bills for his whānau. And I said, bread's $4.50. I've got a family. I'm really finding it hard. And I said, turn off the engine. Let's have a bit of a chat about it. Where he says, it's bills, and I can't get ahead in New Zealand.
Well, that's
and
classic.
I felt sorry for him. Now, in terms of inequality, what we are seeing,
Before you just leave taxis for a second,
Yeah.
that's no accident.
No.
Take Auckland Airport. They're making a killing out of changing the cab rank
Yes.
rules,
Yeah.
which means the poor old drivers take a 7-hour queue to pick up a fare. They make on average about a loaf of bread an hour,
So there you go.
$4.50 an
Yeah.
hour. We've done the sums. It's outrageous.
Yeah, well, that's so back to inequality. I think that is you don't need to convince me on that.
Yep,
I think
yep.
what we're seeing, not only in New Zealand but in the Western world, is this growing younger. And what is the saddest is that we are supposed to be
egalitarian nation, right?
supposedly an egalitarian.
Guess what?
Or-
That Kiwi dream is on life support.
Yeah.
You know,
so-
and if we don't turn things around, and that's why next year's so important. If we don't turn things around next year, if the alternative happened, there was 3 more years to embed this growing inequality and this crony capitalism, God knows where we would be. It is absolutely vital we turn this boat around while there's still time.
my question,
Yep,
I've got
yep.
one question though.
Yep.
It's about raising the wage. Is it or is it not?
Yeah,
It's
it
about
is.
raising.
It's about raising the wage and
So-
reducing the gaps.
So meaningfully,
Yep.
how would you do it? How would Labor do it?
Well, what you need to do is invest in productivity and smarts and get conditions better for exporters. Raising the wage is part of a solution, it's not the whole solution. We have to raise the income of our firms so that they can pay better wages. But we're not going to just wait to inject some money into the pockets of the poorest New Zealanders and the working poor and the middle class families. The minimum wage will go up straight away because the message has got to go to business. Invest in productivity, invest in plant and equipment, invest in exporting and growth.
Do you think New Zealand business is behind you on that?
I think increasingly they are. yeah.
Increasingly?
Yeah, increasingly they are. Now, you know where they start, some of them.
Yep.
They start off with a tribal attachment to national. What's funny about that is you take 30 years worth of data, consistently you find economic growth higher when there are Labour-led governments in power, even though business confidence takes a while to come in behind.
Yeah.
Funny, eh?
David, how is asset sales anything less than an ideologically driven fetish?
Oh, that is what it is. Possibly with a few kickbacks attached, you never know. But there's been $150 million spent on the middlemen, the Alligator Shoe Brigade, who clip the ticket, the lawyers, the accountants, the merchant bankers. That's a pretty powerful incentive. And guess whose friends they tend to be? So let's just put that aside. It is ideological. It's been the #1 policy drive from National after the big tax cuts they gave the top end of town that made inequality worse. They know most New Zealanders don't want this to happen, but look, if there's one message we can get out to the public from today's show, it is that they do have an opportunity in their lap right now to send a message on this. Post away your asset sales referendum and tell the government what you think about this.
And what good will that do?
Well, it will potentially stop the sale of Genesis, right?
Yep.
It will put on public record the fact that New Zealanders are opposed to this sale, and it will make it easier for us to force the government to pay a price at next year's
Do you
election.
think that part of the small government clique that's inside National is part of the thinking that if you cut off assets that actually generate wealth, then it's not their responsibility to redistribute it any longer? So you're actually amputating the state's ability to raise revenue?
Yeah, partly. I don't think they express it in that way. I think for some of them they've got an ideological view that the assets perform better in private hands.
Right.
Look, when you look at Air New Zealand, that's obvious rubbish, you know. When it was in purely private hands, the conflicts between the shareholders drove it to the brink of bankruptcy, and it only recovered when it had a long-term stable state shareholder.
It is, kind of just pick up, it was interesting on Talk Radio and on the station that I'm on, we had this big, and it got to the philosophy of governance. And a lot of people actually rang and said, look, you do get better governance generally in private hands.
It's just not statistically true.
It's
You
not-
take the economic performance of the SOE portfolio, it's almost indistinguishable from the
Is that
stock
right?
market as a whole.
Right.
So there's no evidence to say that private hands are better. Of course, it depends how they're managed, right? And the other thing about it is, to the extent that SOEs are making profits, because they're owned by the Crown, that profit goes back to the taxpayer, right? And then the third thing is, Kiwis know that if a country's not paying its way, flogging off the family silver doesn't solve the problem.
Wallace,
So let's address the problem it caused.
did you throw up a little in your mouth when watching the Prime Minister of New Zealand pimp for a casino? Did you? I had a gag reflux moment. What about you?
Oh, hey, look, can I just put my hand up and say, I'm no big fan of casinos or pokers or anything like that. I just don't find the whole thing
An industry of misery, is it
well,
not?
you know what I think it is, and
Yeah.
I've been to the casino twice, and I was cajoled to go on the first time. Guess what I saw? I'm from Manarewa, and I saw, it was supposed to be a fun night, and all I saw were
People
hundreds
addicted to the
of,
slot
let's
machines.
just face it, Pacific Islanders
Yeah.
or the my whānau.
Just hitting those bloody
and,
pokies.
and I was, and Viv, a friend from Sydney said, "This is $5. You got to play tonight." And I've never sort of been a big fan in terms of economic investment via casino.
Yep.
A person talked to me, she said a great way to do a convention centre is do what they do in the UK and attach it to more of a cultural hub,
Yeah,
an
sure,
artistic
sure,
culture,
sure.
not a casino.
No, that's right. That's right.
So no,
Final-
I've
final-
got
What's the
real,
message we're sending to?
Yeah,
I've got
that's
real
right.
issues about it.
Final question to both of you. The rebuild of Christchurch is one of the only generators of growth. Can relying on natural disasters really be an economic plan? I mean, Bill English is rubbing his hands together hoping a volcano goes off in Auckland. Is that it? Is that
God,
what we've got?
Let's just touch wood and hope that does
Of
not
course.
happen, right? But yeah, okay, so the upside is there's $30 billion to invest, and there'll be some jobs that come out of
Yep.
that. And next year, the growth rate should, on average, be better, partly because of that.
But we can't hope for earthquakes, can we?
No, and look, at the end of the day, we're only just going to get back to where we were before the earthquake started
Sure.
with a few tweaks, right? That shows you the weakness of GDP. It
Yep.
doesn't capture what's really going
Yeah.
on. And it's no substitute for a real plan.
Yeah.
A real plan that says, how do we take New Zealand's best strengths, which actually isn't just the rain and the land and the cows and the trees, it's also what's between the heads of Kiwis. The smart, the innovative, the creative minds, the hard-working New Zealanders who've been resourceful and are ready to give anything a go if we
Yes,
can
but
harness
that takes time, and that's a 20-year plan, isn't it?
And
That's
so
the-
let's-
that's the thing.
politicians
We-
don't particularly
we-
think of
we-
it.
20-year
David,
plan.
We need short-term cash now.
Oh, okay. We got
We need
to
money now.
We got to walk and chew gum at the same time. Of course, there are going to be some activities that will drive short-term cash,
Yeah.
right? Because you can't ignore that. We would want to run a surplus too, just like the current government. The difference between us is we don't for a moment pretend that that's a complete answer to the country's
That's-
problem.
and that's the
We
difference.
need a 20-year plan to work to.
Thank you, panel. Moving on with issue 2, the big news stories this year with the largest erosion of civil liberties with the GCSB mass surveillance legislation, the Len Brown sex scandal, and the Roastbuster rape culture story. Did our media cover them well? Wallace, what do you think was revealed about New Zealand society over the Roastbuster story? What was revealed?
Where do I start on this one? But all I can say, can I just talk from my personal experience because
Yeah, please
I'm
do.
from Radio Live. One of the things, for me, it was about, as I said this on Twitter, it was actually not about opinions, it was about listening and learning. And actually wanting to know the details. And so I did an hour. I talked to people who do know. Dr. Kim McGregor from Rape Prevention, a woman called Louise Nicholas, who's had extraordinary, I mean, you've got to read her book to believe what she went through at the hands of the police. Seriously? My response to that was, as a media, my responsible response as a person in the media was to listen and to learn and to ask questions as what me, as a male, how can I help change the next generation? Okay? It wasn't about that.
Yeah. Do you think a culture of misogyny was revealed?
Amongst the Roastbusters?
Yes, yeah. I mean, these young men thought that this was acceptable
Yeah,
to
it-
post this online, effectively boasting about rape, right?
It was appalling.
Yeah.
It was astonishing and it shocked all of us, and rightfully so. And I'm still trying to grapple in my head about how young men like that could actually ever believe that was normal. No, I think we've got a real issue as males, and we need to ask ourselves and ask our wider family and our brothers and sisters how we can learn. And that's what I was trying to do when I asked Kim McGregor or Louise Nicholas.
David, Cameron Slater reset the low point for New Zealand journalism from the gutter to the sewer with his humiliatingly explicit Len Brown blog. Does this herald, do you think, a disturbingly bleak level of duty tactics for next year's election?
I just don't think it's journalism. I don't think there's any place for it. I wouldn't read some of the stuff that he put up, and I think it is a low point for New Zealand politics. You know, leaving aside for a moment the wisdom of decisions that Mayor Brown made in his private life, and we're not actually really going to that.
No.
What we're seeing is a coordinated political attack on an individual with no holds barred, using any kind of political sleaze and personal material that should not be in the public domain.
Yeah.
And I just hope that politicians of all sides understand that it is not in the public interest for politicians to throw that kind of mud. I never have. I hope I never have to. All right? The Prime Minister says he has a top drawer full of mud. Hey, Mr. Key, we all hear lots of stories. We all have top drawers full of information. We choose not to use them because that is not the country we want to build. I'm going to be running a positive campaign on the issues next year. I believe New Zealanders want a better future. They want a new start. They don't want Cameron Slater style politics.
Wallace, when Dame Anne Salmon described the GCSB mass surveillance law as electronic McCarthyism, did the media sit up and lead on what amounted to the largest erosion of our civil liberties in this country since the waterfront lockout?
That's quite a good question. First, can I do a heads up for Dame Anne Salmon, because I'm a bit of a huge fan of hers. Look out there across Aotearoa. If you've never read her books, pick up the one about Captain Cook. It's a fucking great book. It's such a good read. And I even got my...
you can say that on the last program.
Yeah, we can get away
Seriously,
with it.
I even got my, my wider family, and I sat down and told her the real story of Captain Cook. It's grotesque and it's vicious and it's exciting. You've got to read it. In terms of what she... this is interesting. This is about an academic standing up for her rights as her country.
Yeah.
Look, I was very proud of her. And a lot of people slammed her down. It's not your right to say that.
That's right.
I think that what's happening around the role of the Government Communications Security Bureau is vitally important to know, and more transparency and more oxygen by people like Dame Anne Salmon is all the better for it. And we could have perhaps done more and followed the story more in the media, I think.
David, what did you think of John Campbell's interview with John Key? John Campbell got a lot of criticism for it, but how do you actually interview a leader who effectively was almost psychotic in terms of I'm right and everybody else is wrong? How do you deal with that?
Well, first of all, I think you've got to give points to John Campbell over a long period of time for being willing to tackle in a mature way issues which many in the mainstream media have shied away from. And that was a robust interview. The Prime Minister, to be fair to him, was well prepared, but in writing over John in the way that he did, I think he came across as, I'll use the big A, he came across as arrogant and out of touch with what most New Zealanders are feeling. Most New Zealanders don't like the idea that they are being spied on by their own government, and it would have been very simple, actually, for Mr. Key to give a cast iron guarantee in the law that no New Zealander under any circumstances would ever be spied on by their own government or a partner of their government without a warrant. That was what was required. The government would not honour that commitment in law, right? That would have turned the debate. The fact that the government wouldn't do that, I think, is of grave concern, and that's why we have said, and I've repeated, that we will repeal that law and we will replace it with a law that is respectful of civil liberties and which means no New Zealander will be spied on by their own government without a warrant any time ever.
Yeah.
Hey, are you concerned about the latest Snowden revelations that the NSA seemingly have not bothered with the agreement of not spying on their Five Eyes partners, did so with the British? Are you concerned that the NSA may be spying on New Zealanders now, mass surveillance wise?
Look, I have to say yes, I am, although I haven't seen disclosed any of Snowden's documents which would show what's happening in the New Zealand case.
That's right.
Have with the UK. I understand there's a fracas brewing in Australia. Let's see what the truth is about New Zealand. My understanding of that agreement is quite simple, that none of the partners surveil the domestics or the citizens of each other. That's part of the original.
They're allies, aren't they?
That's the nature of the agreement.
That's the nature of the
agreement.
Yeah.
And I will be very interested and very concerned if that's been abrogated, and we'll have to look at that as it arises. Now, I'm not going to speculate about stuff I don't know about. Let's see where the facts lie.
Final question to both of you. What were your picks for the big news stories this year?
The big news story this year, what it was actually that. It was the Global Communications Security Bill. And actually, but having said that, I don't think it's going to be perhaps as big an election issue. I'd perhaps like it to be, because I think it's very, very important for the country. But I just don't it's a hard one to get around. I think what John Campbell was trying to do is to get the mainstream, up and go for that one. I really do think that where to go for New Zealand in terms of extracting our mineral resources was a big story for me, both for mining and drilling, because this is all about what David's talking about in terms of where we go into our future. It's short-term thinking versus long-term. David here is trying to sort of paint Labour in terms of that long-term innovation, but there is a core of New Zealanders that go, you know what, nah, we want to mine, we've got the minerals, we need to extract. So I think that was a very big issue for 2013.
What do you think of the big stories of 2013 were?
I agree with what Wallace has been saying around the GCSB stuff. There was a moment there before the bill went through where the average Kiwi just started to get it, right? And I don't think that issue is going to go away. I think we live in a world where people's digital privacy is going to be an increasingly important
I agree
issue.
I agree with that. Yeah.
But actually in behind all of that, I think what we're seeing is a real inequality story where for the poorest third, they've gone backwards. For the middle third, they've barely kept up, and our middle income families are under increasing pressure, the cost of living and all those stresses. And for the top couple of percent, they've made a killing. And as if the market on its own wasn't enough to deliver that, you've got the Prime Minister personally reinforcing that by doing crony deals for his mates.
Hey, Bomber, that is an issue, and that I agree. I mean, look, we're doing okay, eh? There's a lot of people in New Zealand who are just going from bill to bill to bill.
Bill to bill to bill.
And it is a concern.
Thank you, panel. Moving on with issue 3, what predictions do our panellists have for 2014? David, if Colin Craig becomes the next Minister for Science and Innovation, will witch-burning get research scholarship funding? Is New Zealand ready for a lurch that far to the right?
No. I think if Mr Craig is fortunate enough to get the East Coast Bay's seat, courtesy of the National Party, he'll be hoping he can see Russia from his doorstep. Right? He is New Zealand's Sarah Palin. He is, I'm not saying he's an unintelligent man. He's certainly a very wealthy man, but that actually makes him more dangerous. The ideas and policies that he stands for, whether it's witch burning or the so-called chemtrails controversy,
this is
far out.
Leader of a party
this is
believes that?
Far out wacko stuff.
Yeah.
And I think what it says to New Zealanders is that National has now pressed, because of the rise of the Labour Party, the panic button. And the break glass only an emergency solution is Colin Craig, because they cannot count on New Zealand First. Their support parties are disappearing. Just look at the Axe the Tax campaign, where that's all unravelled on the government just this week. And the only solution that they've got is someone who thinks the earth is flat, that creation happened in 6 days.
He hasn't said that, has he?
No, he hasn't, to be fair enough. He's a creationist, but he doesn't know how long it took. And fair enough, there may be some intent in that, we don't know, right? But someone whose views are extreme. His views on gender equality are bizarre, right? And his views on social progress, something that's outside the mainstream.
Is hitting children really the most important, legalising hitting children the most important issue in front of New Zealand right now?
No, it's not, and I wonder where he's going to get to on his binding referenda requirement as well. So.
Wallace, is John Banks a political corpse or a zombie politician who doesn't know he's dead yet? Is Epsom overact?
I don't know. He's on the show tomorrow. He's talking about charter schools, so we'll find out. Greetings to you all. Is he?
Is Epsom overact?
Yes, yes, I think it is actually.
I think Epsom's overact. I think New Zealand's overact.
Act interesting. I mean, but where are the core libertarian supporters going to go? I don't know.
I think some of them will go to the Conservatives.
Do you think so?
Yeah, I think some of them.
I'm just not quite sure.
Some of them will go to the National Party. Some of them will go off on their own, but I think ACT is over. I think the Maori Party's on its last legs. I think United Future will be very lucky to get back, and there is the government's problem. You've got a rising left, and you've got a deteriorating right fringe, and the break glass and emergency solution is Colin Craig's
Question to both of you quickly. Who will fight it out for the national leadership of key losers? Who are the two contenders?
If key losers, well, Judith Collins and... Judith Collins.
It can't be Stephen Joyce. He's got the personality.
No, not Stephen Joyce. That's why I'm saying who else. I think Judith Collins is a contender there.
Bridges and Collins?
Bridges is way too wet behind the ears. It's Collins and Joyce. Don't underestimate Joyce. He's a very smart operator. He may not be Mr. Personality, but he is the ideas factory behind that government.
Final question. What are your top predictions for next year?
Top predictions? Well, I just come back to what, and this is I do agree with David on, it's the conversation is going to be set around inequality and the haves and have-nots.
Yep.
That really what it's going to be, because I'm really feeling it, mate.
Yeah.
Coming back from Europe, coming here and seeing the homeless on our street, and just the sense that people are really struggling. That's going to be the conversation of 2014 for the election. It's going to be an exciting year.
What's your top prediction politically for next year?
That Labor's going to win the election, that it's going to be a tough, close race. It'll be a race that'll go down in the history books as one of our most hotly contested. There will be a change of government, and it will be a new beginning for New Zealanders, and there will be a huge sigh of relief breathed, not because any government's perfect, but because they know that the new government that I lead will have their best interests at heart, that we'll have one set of rules for business. We will try and build a long-term pathway to high-value competitive markets. We will have fairness in our social policy. We'll deliver better wages to workers, and we will make life just a bit easy for hard-pressed Kiwi families.
And you're going to beat John Key on the podium on that night?
Oh my God, I hope so.
Hey, I'm going to have a lot of fun with this campaign. I am looking forward. I don't underestimate my opponent.
No.
He is a slick act,
Yep.
but he has got increasingly out of touch, and New Zealanders are getting sick of glib answers to tough problems. They want real policy, real vision, and a new beginning, and that is what we will offer them.
Final word, Wallace Chapman.
Final word, what's the final word? I just front page of the Dominion Post, basically very, very simple. Bus drivers not treating people with disabilities with respect. It was the front page of the Dominion Post today, and a person with a disability was told you're never going to come on a bus again. I don't like to see that. I do like the equality around that particular issue. And also, too, to the people out there watching this program here, Citizen A, going to miss you, Bomber, on this show.
Thank you, Wallace.
Thank you for entertaining us and informing us. Good on you, buddy.
Thank you. David, your final word.
Well, look, firstly, I'd like to just acknowledge you and acknowledge the show and say that it's been a really important part of New Zealand's political discussion, and I'm really going to miss it, and I've been particularly proud to be able to accept your invitation to be here today. So thank you to you, thank you to the team. Good luck for Citizen A. And a final word to our viewers. There is one thing you can do over the next couple of weeks, which is to post away your referendum form on the state asset sales referendum. Tell the government no, tell them that you're sick of their arrogant, out-of-touch approach. You never wanted those assets sold, you don't want any more sold. It's a very simple thing to do, to fill out your form and send that message to Wellington. Please do it.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Wallace. Ladies and gentlemen,
Good on ya.
to my final word. Thanks to the Ministry of Culture and Heritage and Cordia for selling all the free view frequency for profit. This is the final Citizen A. I need to thank all of the panellists who have joined us over the last 3 years: Chris Trotter, Selwyn Manning, Phoebe Fletcher, Dr. Wayne Hope, Keith Locke, Julie Ferrier, Fesso Collins, Marama Davidson, Sue Bradford, Matthew Hooton, Colin Craig, Professor Jane Kelsey, Claudette Hoiti, Jacinda Ardern, Nikki Kay, Simon Press, Matt McCartan, Penny Holtz, Mike Lee, and even dear old Cameron Slater, who was on the show in the early days. I also need to thank our wonderful crew of Debs and Will, and thank you, all of those at Face TV who worked tirelessly to make public broadcasting happen here. Finally, let me say that it is in the interests of the elites to limit television that challenges their narrative. It has been a privilege and an honour to be part of that challenge for 3 years. Thanks for watching Aotearoa. Good night and good luck.
Supporting local content so you can see more of New Zealand on air.